welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and tonight's guest is Chloe Weise, Vice President of A&R at RCA Records. From intern to executive, Chloe's worked her way up the ladder by first assisting the A&R and International Marketing departments to quickly elevating the company and looking after multi-platinum selling and chart-topping albums, some of which include Sia's This Is Acting, the Backstreet Boys comeback album DNA, and Miley Cyrus's #1 Billboard rock album Plastic Hearts. Most recently, she's been determined to break Kane Brown as a global crossover star, in addition to developing new music from established artists like Becky G, Martin Garrix, Tate McRae, and Purple Disco Machine. She's also signed artists like Sasha Sloan, Trevor Daniel, and signed records like Walker Hayes' breakout single Fancy Like. So with all that said, Chloe, thanks so much for being here. Very excited to have you. How's it going?
Things are good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So let's dive right in. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
Okay. So, from a personal side, I think honestly, it took the pandemic for me to really realize this. But if I was looking back to my 25-year-old self, I think it's really important to make the time for yourself to find your peace. It's so easy to get lost in the sauce between like all of the shows and events and dinners and just being busy and traveling a lot. But now, like, I find that it's way more important for me to be able to find balance. I
Mm,
really value the nights I can be at home cooking with my husband, listening to like samba music and dancing with our
mm-hmm.
dog. I think that you have to be able to do both and have that time so that you can be even better at your job. On a professional level, I would say probably my biggest advice to me myself would be to not lose the joy in why we do this. It's like the same kind of concept of getting lost in it all, where it's like it's a very competitive industry where
Mm,
everyone, is going after the same artists and wants these deals, and everyone wants to be the best and, are being judged by their hit. But I think, you really have to trust your gut instincts. And if something doesn't feel right, if a situation doesn't feel right, more artists will come along, and that's totally fine. But you have to look out for yourself, number one. So I guess they kind of mix together, really.
They do. They usually do. I love that. So I'm curious, what was it like the very first artist do you remember that you signed?
First artist that I signed. I mean, it's hard because I've actually been involved in a lot of signings, but like kind of like one of a number of people. The first artist that I signed was probably Sasha Sloan. And it
Mhm.
was, I had met her as a songwriter, and I was just so blown away by the stories that she could tell in her lyrics. And for me, even a lot of the projects that I work on are very focused on, finding material for artists and focused on like what the story of those songs are, or finding the right songwriter pairing to put people with. And so I think finding someone like that where it was just so pure and the stories were there was really amazing.
That's great. Alrighty, we're moving right along. Question number two. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that it's no different in the music industry. And sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Let's see. I like that you said sometimes they can be good, because there are a lot of little secrets about this business. But
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the biggest secret is I think so much of the reputation of the music industry is that people are shady. Like I saw an interview that Issa Rae did recently where she was talking about how people, can really get screwed in the business. But
Right.
I think the reality is like they're really special, amazing people in this industry as well. And you can really find your tribe. Like for me, I've been at RCA now for 10 years. So I've literally grown up around these people. And so many of them I consider family at this point. At my wedding, I was surrounded by so many of them. And
Mm-hmm.
even like my husband, we were both assistants in the music industry at the same time and finally met as young executives. So I think don't believe everything you hear or that you read. Like there are some really, really amazing people. and it's just about finding them.
So I guess going off of that, do you have any advice for anyone who's like getting their first internship or just starting out as an assistant, kind of like how to build a community?
Definitely. I think that the most important thing to remember is that the music industry changes so quickly, and you can be hot one day and not the next. It's so important to, give people the time of day and the respect, regardless of what level they are. I think it's a lot of people are so focused on growing and kind of like networking up. But the reality is, you really want to grow amongst your peers. I think it's the most fun when you can have a win with everyone that you're homies with and kind of like take it from there.
Definitely. Okay, here we go. We're already at the last one. Throughout your career, I can only imagine that you've been asked lots of questions, whether for an industry conference, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, I'll bet there was one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be the answer?
I like this question a lot. It's something I've been thinking about as like through the pandemic, since so many new people were starting new jobs without actually having FaceTime with each other, we actually started sending around a survey that people fill out with, random factoids about themselves.
Oh, wow.
And one of the questions that I love seeing the most is people talking about like what the first piece of music that really moved them was, that made them, feel that desire to be a part of this. And so for me, like Whitney Houston's voice was the first thing I heard. Like, I have nothing was just like, what is going on here? Who is this? And I was just blown away by it. And I still feel like now, I've had such a blessing of working with some of the best vocalists in our industry, from like Sia and Miley to even like, I mean, of course, Pentatonix was one of the first artists that I had a lot of success with. And the things they can do with their mouths is truly insane.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy.
And so I think to this day, like, I still get like choked up for a little bit of that mistiness when I see a voice that just blows me away, whether it's, in a showcase or, at a Jazz and Sullivan concert, just crying my eyes out. But I think that's the thing that no matter what, whenever I hear that pure, unadulterated vocal, that's still the thing that gets my rocks off.
Do you have the same feeling with any particular music venue?
Ooh, music venue. That's a tough one. I mean, I will say I've seen some pretty special shows at Radio City Music Hall. I lived in New York for 11 years. And one of the last shows I saw there before the pandemic was Christina Aguilera singing like all of the hits back from like my youth when I was just obsessed with her. I've also like stood on the top of the marquee at the Radio City Music Hall while the Backstreet Boys are performing for the VMAs. Wow. So it's really been a span. But I feel like that's somewhere which is such like an iconic, legendary venue. And then to see these people who have been meaningful throughout your life, it's really amazing.
Well, Chloe, it has been so great having you on tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Of course. And thank you for having me.
To all of my listeners, I know you enjoyed hearing from Chloe just as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. So stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.